Hello, 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 everybody. My name is Abhi Shrestha. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm the Education Associate for Steppenwolf Theater. Welcome back if you joined us for part one of this workshop this past Tuesday, and welcome if you were anyone new joining us today. I know Erika and I are really excited to be in community with you and to get the opportunity to be in direct dialogue with a few of you later today, which I'll speak to in just a moment. Additionally, I wanted to take a moment to acknowledge the awesome work of our captioner, Jessica Spriggs, with ACS, Alternative Communication Services, as well as Lizzie Rangel and Benny Yamas from Faith Interpreting Services, who are providing our ASL interpretation for today's workshop. If you are someone who specifically could use the captioning services, you can find the closed captioning button below at the bottom menu of this webinar if you'd like to activate that in your window. This workshop will also be on gallery view, so the ASL interpreting will be available throughout today's workshop. When we share slides today, we're going to leave some space at the beginning for folks to just read through them before anyone starts speaking and we start interpreting, just to give some space for that as well. And I also wanted to take a moment to thank so many of the Steppenwolf staff members who are making today's webinar happen. A special shout out to John Rooney, our Education and Leadership Programs Coordinator, who's making all the tech magic happen today. So hello, John. Erika, again, hello. Thank you so much for joining us. We are very excited to sort of dive in today. For those of you who are joining us and new today, on Tuesday, Erika and I had a conversation about their relationship to poetry, their writing, their process, and then we issued a maker challenge. And together, we'll sort of be in community and conversation about that work in just a moment. But before we do that, I wanted to open up this virtual space with a land acknowledgement. John, if you wouldn't mind throwing that slide up. And again, I'll give just a few moments for folks to read this before I hop in and start speaking it. Awesome. So I just wanted to recognize that Steppenwolf Theater sits on native land. The area our building resides on is the traditional homelands of the people of the Council of Three Fires, including the Ojibwe, the Potawatomi, and the Odawa. Although for over 200 years, Native nations have been forcibly removed from this territory, we must also acknowledge that this land continues to be a site of gathering and of healing for more than a dozen other tribal nations and remains home to over 100,000 tribal members in the state of Illinois. John will be posting a link in the chat to an awesome website that can help you learn more about the land that you're on. Thank you so much, John. Awesome. So as some of you may remember, we had a few reminders of how we'll be using the Zoom webinar today, which I'd like to go over for any new members who are joining us, and also as a refresher to those who joined us earlier this week. John, if you wouldn't mind moving on to the next slide. Thank you. Please be mindful that we have participants ranging from 13 years old and up, so that's just something to keep in mind. The chat feature you can use to engage with other panelists and participants today, and we'll give you instructions when to use the chat, but you can always feel free to authentically engage as well. I suggest choosing panelists and participants when using the chat, especially later on when we'll be giving feedback to folks who are sharing their poetry. Like in part one, the Q&A feature should also be used for any questions you might have for guest artists or around logistics of the workshop. We'll attempt to really get to those questions towards the end of today's webinar. So please, throughout the workshop, feel free to throw in questions there as well. As a reminder, you can access captioning by clicking the CC button at the bottom of the screen. Today, some of you will be able to use the raise hand icon at the bottom of this menu to be unmuted by us to share your work with the guest artists and webinar. Something that I just wanted to throw in is that I wanted to note that we may be a little bit strict on time just to ensure that we get to as many folks who want to share as possible. If you are sharing your work, I really encourage that you only choose a maximum of 10 lines to share just to help us with this. And thank you for understanding if I have to gently cut you off and move us forward today. That's just really, we want to make sure we get to as many folks as we can. For those of you who communicate using American Sign Language and would like to share your writing, you can identify that in the chat, and our interpreters will be available, and we'll make that happen as best we can. Awesome. Again, we're not censoring anyone's voice today, not even our panelists, and we will touch on adult topics and language, but overly gratuitous language or hate speech is strictly prohibited, and we reserve the right to remove any participants not abiding by these guidelines, which we won't do because we won't have to get to that. So awesome. Great. I feel like I've spoken enough. John, we can sort of get rid of this slideshow. Erika, I'm really excited to sort of delve into the Maker Challenge and have you speak to us a little bit about your process. I know you were also writing it and responding to it as well. How did that go for you before we jump in?
It was actually really fun, and I feel like I'm in a groove, a poetry groove right now, so I'm very excited.
I love that.
Yeah, I forget how helpful the writing exercises are until I do them again, and I'm
totally.
like, yeah, this is amazing. And the reason I think they work so well is that they really get me out of my own head, if that makes sense. I start using language in a way that's different. I use words that I normally wouldn't use. And so that to me is really exciting because I never want to keep writing the same poems over and over again, because that to me is just really boring and no one wants to read the same work, you know, hundreds of times. So for me, it's really important to challenge myself to try something different and to push my limits. And so it was really cool to do. I came up with all sorts of ideas. It's starting to kind of coalesce into something. I don't know what, but it's kind of exciting to see it. I feel like there's some juice there, you know, and I look forward to expanding upon it.
Right, and I love also hearing that, like, right, it's not like you write it and it's a finished piece when it comes out. Like, there's so many stages of the process. Like, right now we're like, I feel like anytime I write, I'm like, this thing is still in the nursery. Like, it needs some time. Like, I have a nursery of just, like, poems that are, like, not ready for anyone to see, let alone myself. And I'm like,
I love that image. That's really cool. Like little chicks in a incubator or something. I don't know.
Exactly.
I think that's cool. And that's kind of how I approach it. My poems take weeks, months, years to finish. So, you know, there's really no hurry. Poetry, I think, takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of reflection and anguish sometimes, for sure.
So many emotions.
Yeah.
I'm going to just, for anyone who's joining us today who wasn't here on Tuesday, so the Maker Challenge, and John, if you wouldn't mind throwing this in the chat, the Maker Challenge so on Tuesday we had Erika lead us through two like sort of free write exercises based on, one of them was like translating a poem in a language that we are not familiar with. And then the second one was a free write to music. And we sort of used those two to generate some material. And the prompt that we sort of left everyone with was picking one object that meant something special to you, something unique, an object that has a very specific relationship to you. And using sort of the ingredients we mentioned, writing a 10 to 15 line poem that attempts to communicate how your chosen object makes you feel without being literal, without telling anyone what the actual relationship is between you and the object, right? And this is sort of inspired by Erika's poem Swadad that we also listened to and talked about earlier in the last workshop earlier this week. The ingredients we shared were to use 3 lines from your response to visual translation exercise, 3 lines from your response to the music exercise, and 1 line that's a question. and using that, rearranging that however you want, sort of using that as a jumping point to write this poem about this object, trying to translate emotion. Today we're going to start with like listening to Erikas, and then we'll have a moment to sort of model the feedback, because I think we want to be in conversation with all of you as well about this. And the way we'll do feedback is super rooted in what we call what is Liz Lerman's critical response, which I sent out in the PDF earlier this week as well. And it's just 2 steps today. One of them, the first one being after we listen to your poem, the listener, Erika, will just share a statement of meaning, which is like, this is what I'm hearing, this is what I noticed, this is what I heard, this is what stood out to me, sort of in line with those things. And then step 2 is actually having the artist as the questioner, the artist who shared their work, sort of posing questions that they have about it. And I know, John, thank you for putting this step in the chat as well. So we'll do that during today's workshop. Something I want to note is that our special guest will be joining us later today. Isaac Gomez, who wrote I Am Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter, the adaptation of Erika's book for Steppenwolf for young adults. So Isaac will be joining us in just a few moments. And when they hop in, we'll also fold in Isaac to really be a part of this conversation between the participants and guest artists as well. So just to note that if anyone's like, who's that person who just pops up in the screen? That's Isaac Gomez, which I'm really excited. So Erika, I would love to start with, if you could share the poem you wrote or this thing you wrote in response, and I'll sort of be the person to model the feedback later.
Great, thank you. Just a quick thing, I never share work that is unfinished, so this is very new to me, and I figured if I'm going to be vulnerable, then well, if you're going to be vulnerable, then I should be as well. And so this is pretty challenging for me because I am a perfectionist, and I have a hard time putting things out that I feel are not complete. So yeah, this is kind of scary, but exciting at the same time.
Yeah.
And I feel like this is a really cool space to do it. So thank you for allowing me to share this. So what I came up with is kind of a hodgepodge, and I think there's something unfolding here, as I said, but I don't know what it is yet. It's called Not a Pandemic Poem. My time here is a hexagon, so I trim the chrysanthemum beautifully. Behind the hawk, an immense groan. I have to be open to its wings and silences. Everything disgusts me, and yet it's lovely. We have to live with his hatred of himself. Tell me, how do we survive horror, music, trees? Everything not me smells like an angry gland. I hold my joy like the antler of an animal I once loved. It's the truest thing I know.
I love that. Thank you so much. So special. It is so vulnerable to share work that like you are like, this is a baby. Like this is so early in its stage. And so thank you so much. Absolutely. Snaps. If anyone wants to in the chat as well to do this, I think this is what we'll be doing with all the other participants as well. Write down moments that really stood out to you, lines, words that really stood out to you, just these statements of meaning. You know, I think for me, the first thing that stood out is the title. I think we talked a lot yesterday about being present. Not yesterday, on Tuesday, about being present and how poetry offers this lens of presence and observation. And the title for me struck in a way of like, I don't know, it reminded me of like how sometimes I feel like everyone is doing the same thing right now sometimes. Yeah. And I'm like, there's a mundanity to like, just like the same, being oversaturated with so much of the same thing. And I think that was something that like immediately, again, it shifted me to notice that in a deeper way.
Thank you. Yeah, there's a sort of self-consciousness there. It's like, oh, I don't want to write this pandemic poem, but here I am kind of writing it.
Right. I don't want to do this, but like also this is where I'm at right now, right? And like I have to sort of reckon with that. I'm seeing several moments of like contradiction, someone says, right? We see like two like the opposing sort of thoughts in the same moment, which is super exciting.
Yeah, this is really great feedback. Thank you.
Ooh, I love this. I appreciated the sympathetic attention given to the environment. Yes. I love that. I think when you were talking about like, we have to the line about like opening its wings. Can you read that one again
Sure.
for us real quick?
Behind the hawk, an immense groan. I have to be open to its wings and silences.
For me, what stood out was like sort of the expanse that of the imagery of expanse I get when I think about wings, but also this like stillness that I get when I think about silences, right?
Right.
And so I think those two things really really resonate in a very beautiful way.
Thank you. Yeah, there's a lot of paying attention to nature right now, at least for me, because there's not much else going on in my life, you know?
I know we were just talking about the birds,
right?
Love I feel birds. Like the birds are so much louder right now because like there aren't people outside.
Yeah, and like, I mean, we can't go hang out with friends, so like my partner and I look out the window and just like watch the neighborhood, and we sit in the yard and we just look at the garden, you know? And so there's a lot of just contemplation and appreciation, but also a lot of anger and horror at what is happening.
Yeah, totally. So I want to shift to the second step. What are some questions that you have, you know, about this poem for you right now? Some things that are percolating in your brain while you're thinking about this poem or this piece.
I just wonder how it's going to evolve, how I'm going to make sense of what's happening. I mean, one way that I am making sense of the world is knowing that so much of the suffering that we're experiencing is a result of a man who just clearly hates himself and is manifesting this hatred by really hurting everybody else. And so how do we grapple with that? It's been very challenging for me to like watch the news and just watch him speak. It's just horrifying to me because everything he says is a lie. And how do we move forward with this? How do we heal as a country when we have someone in power who is so caustic and just an abysmal human being?
I hear that. Yeah. I'm seeing folks asking, do you feel that the poem is complete? I feel like the poem could keep going. And I think we're going to get to that later, right? How do we continue with a piece that we've started? And so we'll talk about that a little later too.
Yeah.
Super exciting. Awesome. So I would love to now sort of open it up to participants. If you're interested in sharing something that you wrote in response, feel free to raise your hand, use the raise hand feature, and I will unmute you and get us started. So we're gonna start with Richard Perez. I'm gonna hit unmute, Richard.
Hello.
Hello. Thank you
How
so
are
much
you?
for joining us, Richard.
Thank you so much for holding this great workshop. It's this is my second day here, and Erika, you're phenomenal, and Abby, you're great. Just
Oh my God.
asking great questions. So.
Richard, where are you joining us from?
From Michigan.
Oh, super exciting.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Hey.
And so I certainly have. I'm. Thank you, Erika, for your vulnerability, because this is probably one of the most vulnerable things for me, who's never written a poem before. But I wrote a little, so it's just I love the. I appreciate the opportunity. So.
Awesome.
Yeah, thank you for sharing.
Richard, whenever you're ready.
Okay, this is called The Porcelain Heart. As I navigate the beating of this wintry heart, it births a longing at odds with my forbearance. Night candy howls her sentences. While angry steeds trample my forgetfulness, she sings aloud with joy and rapture, a song that robs us of our fire. Ancient warriors though we be, our time is ceasing. The elixir of wanting transforms our autonomy and foretells of my requiem. Because the etching of the proclamation is set in glass, does it mean this sacred peace will break? I want to join the songstress and proclaim, I am a foreigner in this land, and yet my heart is tethered to this place. This space of magic mundanities and extraordinaries, this simple place, this place of being.
Richard.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing. Oh my God.
Wow. Yeah.
Yes, I also, someone was like, Richard, that's your first poem? Oh my God, ridiculous. No, truly, really, really beautiful.
Yeah, there's some great moments in here.
Absolutely.
The exercises were so instrumental in
Yay.
moments. Yeah, it was just really profound.
Awesome. Erika, yeah, would you mind starting and sharing some moments that really stood out to you, some sort of the step one part of this feedback?
Yeah, I see this poem as a poem about desire and the consequences of desire. There's a sort of exuberance, a sort of Walt Whitman quality to it that I saw throughout. The mystery of like human existence, the fragility of being a person. There's like the idea of a universal spirit in a sense. And I love the contradiction between magic and mundanity. I think that's really interesting, and it reminds me of what we've been talking about, of like paying attention to the small moments in life and just really being present. And I thought you really captured that essence really well.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. I'm going to read some of these from the folks here as well. Magic mundanities, this phrase feels so right for this moment in this time. Consequences of desire, Erika, absolutely. I love. Something that really stood out to me was also like how you navigate like the relationship to land, how you feel tethered in this way, but also the question you posed before that. I think that's really stood out in a way that caused the listener to reflect as well on my relationship, I think.
Thank you.
So that's really beautiful. Richard, what are some questions that you have about this piece? Some things that you're thinking about?
Well, you know, because so many of these lines were taken from the two exercises, I guess my concern is that I tried to find the lines that somehow thematically fit into what I wanted to write about. And so I just want to make sure that I continue down that path as I continue working on it. If that is coming across, and if it doesn't seem disjointed, I guess is the big question. Yeah,
I felt like there was a cohesive quality to it. I think with poetry, what's so amazing is that you can do whatever you want, right? And so you could have a poem that is concise and tight You could have a poem that is like really airy and messy and jagged, you know.
Sure.
You could have a poem that is like elegant, another poem that's, you know, breaking through the page in a sense, physically when you see the words. My poem looks a little bit like, well, it looks like this. And there's like some staggering, you know, and I think that's probably how the poem is gonna look. And so, I mean, if you want that sort of disoriented quality, like that's something you could totally do. The content and the form can speak to one another in that way. And so that's perfectly okay. But yeah, I think desire was the underlying theme for me that I saw. And so I think you should continue it. You should play with it, try different formats. I think that's really fun. You may, you know, see the poem in a different way when you break the lines differently, or when you compress, or, you know, whatever you want. So I think the idea here is just to have fun with it.
Totally. And I love hearing also, Erika, what you mentioning is like, also disjointed doesn't necessarily mean bad, right? So like if it's feeling disjointed, like posing that question of like, oh, okay, what does that mean? Is that, how do we make that intentional, right? If that's where the poem feels like it's wanting to like live too. So like, I feel like questioning that versus like immediately feeling like it being disjointed necessarily means that it's wrong or bad.
Yeah, I mean, I have a poem that's like mostly non sequiturs, you know, like they're independent of each other, but at the same time, there's a sort of theme, you know, there's a theme of shame. And so just play around and see how it looks. And, you know, you don't have to show it to anyone until you're ready.
Yeah. Thank you so much,
Richard.
So appreciate you. Appreciate it.
Great. All right, next up we have, and let me know if I'm mispronouncing this name, Athanasius. I'm gonna unmute you real quick.
Hi, yeah, Athanasius.
Athanasius, thank you. Hello.
Hi.
Where are you joining us from?
From Chicago.
Yes, amazing. Well, the space is yours if you wanna go ahead and share.
Wonderful. Okay, this has no title.
Great.
Hung from a rope by the feet in our ancestral square, I stood punching fists in between fur and fat, in white leather sandals, face burnt to an olive. In the garage that summer, my father had told me what he had stuffed in each suitcase en route to America. On the floor they slept, my mother and father, and I asked her if it was painful. She replied, "Nothing is painful when you are in love." Hello, my American mind, resisting influence, refusing to sing in any other tongue, wondering, was it categorically Promethean, this vivascalia to pick apart my hair and posture surrender? Oh, what a small and bare trouble it is to live in two places at once.
Wow. That's great.
Beautiful. I'm just like immediately reading from the chat, like, I feel like so many people really, the first line just was like such, and it's like hook. Nothing is painful when you're in love.
Yeah,
so
that line, I wrote that down because it was stunning. And it's such a simple line in a sense. It's very plain spoken, but it says many, many things. And it's so concise. I really enjoyed that. I see a lot of anger, like a lot of underlying anger, a lot of like displacement, migration, but also a lot of love and, you know, a sense of belonging and not belonging. And I really liked the journey that it took me on. So thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely. Again, reading some of this from the chat, a beautiful poem that works on both the personal and larger global level. Sort of the sadness behind feeling torn between two countries. Just a lot of lines sticking out. the moment about ancestral lands sticking out. Do you have any questions that's sort of percolating in your brain right now about this poem?
I guess I'm always interested in, okay, I write something and then what to do now. How to get it somewhere where others would consider it finished, that it could be legible.
Sure. I think the process differs for everyone. I could tell you a little bit about what I do, and then maybe that's helpful for you. When I have a poem like the one that we have created with the exercises, I often let it sit for a while, and I read other poetry, and I try to absorb a lot of what I read. And sometimes I feel like poems, at least for me, they come in pieces. And so this poem that I wrote might take me months to complete because I haven't received everything that I need to complete it. And so I think sometimes we need to, put it away. Other times we need to bring it back. We need to read it out loud a lot. That's something that I find very, very important. And just always immerse yourself in other poems because those are our greatest teachers always. And then when you feel like you have a good draft, I think it's great to share it with someone whose opinion you respect, someone who would give you thoughtful but honest feedback. And I think that has been really critical to me because when you're in a poem and you're so deeply entrenched in it, you don't see outside of it at times. And so I need another perspective to give me, different ways of seeing it, different ways of approaching what I'm trying to do. And so, yeah, I think, essentially you just play, as I said before, you have fun with it, and then little by little you could hone it and then share and then revise again. And it just, for me, the process is very long. So I don't know how it looks for you, but just I feel it's important that you don't rush and you just enjoy the process of it.
Thank you. And thank you so much. All right, we're gonna keep moving. Awesome. So next up, I'm gonna unmute Tina Catania. Please let me know if I'm mispronouncing your name.
Hi, no, that was good.
Awesome. Hello, Tina. Where are you joining us from?
Rhode Island?
Awesome, super exciting.
Okay, thank you.
The space is yours.
Thanks. I don't know how to title poems, so I have no title. Repeating the steps, the climbs, down the mountain, up the mountain, from Limado to Limado. The weight on her head is nothing, a nothing that feeds the men. Messages from one saint to another. Then he accompanied her to obliqueness. The weight vanished, made modern. Now invisible, heavier, one we could never escape. Shock became crumbs, seeping to epiphany. The endings we missed, the real weight wasn't there. Returning to empty Limada, running hands over cool marble, they became photos we kissed. Shedding tears for all the losses at once, documenting them to remember, never to forget. Americanization, nevermore. Americanizzazione mai più.
Wow, thank you for sharing.
Y'all are so amazing. This is
these are so great. So congrats to everyone for doing
already. Just reading some from the chat. Shock became crumbs. Love that line. Great line. I don't know this place at all. I do now. The nothing that feeds the men. The weight on her head is nothing. So many moments sticking out.
I see a lot of erasure. I feel as a woman, if I'm interpreting that correctly, feeling as if sometimes we don't exist, we don't matter. And there's a sort of exasperation that I feel when I listen to it, and like a breathlessness and a quiet sort of anger, and also like a nostalgia for a place that I don't really know, but I'm very, very interested in.
I love that. Tina, what are some questions that you have about the piece right now? Some things, some thoughts that are percolating for you?
Yeah, I guess similar to what Anastasia said also, and Richard beforehand, is I don't really know what to do with this, and if it is anything, sometimes I feel like it's too simple, and I really appreciated the exercise because I feel like that's where I got some of my good lines. The translation one, I just love that.
That's awesome. Yeah, I don't think it's simple at all. So rest assured that there is a lot of complexity, and there's a lot of depth that you could keep mining. I think it's great to ask yourself like where this poem is coming from, and to really go there. I think there's a lot of hurt in the poetry, and I wonder like what the source of it is, and can you keep uncovering that. So I think that's a really great way to approach it, to really just be with the poem and allow yourself to go where your mind needs to go, and keep free writing. I think that's one way to discover what the poem is actually trying to reveal to you. Sometimes I see poems as like different entities that are trying to teach us a thing. And so you have to kind of be open to what that is. And so, yeah, just really have fun. I always say that, like play with the language. I think poetry should be pleasurable in some form, even if it is painful.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Before we move on to our next participant, I just wanted to take a moment to say hello to Isaac. Hi, Isaac.
Hi.
Hi everyone, Erika, you're looking so cute. I'm so sorry I'm late, everyone. I was dealing with a family thing, so I apologize. But
no apologies.
I'm really looking forward to hearing some work, and you know, I can't say I'm a poet in the same way Erika is so beautifully, but there is a lot of poeticism in my playwriting, and I hope that.
For sure.
Thank you. And so I hope whatever I'm able to offer is of use in that regard, but you know, I wouldn't go and be like, Isaac the poet said this. I don't know.
You have a poet's heart.
I do. Thank you for seeing me.
It's so good to see you. Okay, I'm excited just to catch you up. Right, we're just listening to some participants share their responses to the Maker Challenge. We asked folks to write in response to like picking an object that means something really meaningful to them, and translating their relationship via a 10 to 15 line poem, not literally, but just like how do you emotionally translate something, you know, how do you translate emotions in that? So we'll keep moving, and then later I'm excited to have a conversation between Erika and Isaac as well. Okay, next up I have MM Green. I'm gonna unmute you.
Hello. Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes, hi, how's it going?
I'm good. Okay, so I don't have a title for this one, but I just wrote it today a little bit before it started.
Great.
Awesome.
Memories in awe. Your crack is still there. I smile. The way you fit my hand, your color greenish blue. New images form. Again, I can't help but smile. You are reborn because of what you bring me. I then know the time truly is now. If I do not take up the task, I will be haunted for now, forever, until my breaths are my last.
Wow. That's really great. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
Beautiful.
Yeah, there's a lot of really tactile imagery that I enjoy. the hand, the crack, the greenish blue, I think is really striking. There's a joy, but there's also a sadness, and I wonder how it's intersecting, like what is happening. And so I would love for you to dig deeper and to really uncover what else is trying to come forth in the poem. I think there's a lot here.
Yeah, Isaac, anything that's standing out to you?
Echoing much of what Erika is saying, in addition to, I really saw a strong sense of self. So much of the language is saying like, you are this to me. This idea of, you are reborn in what you bring me, right? I felt a strong sense of that tactileness, and specifically in relation to the self, which made me more curious. I was like, oh, this is someone who, I don't know what this object is, but it made me wonder, like, is this not like, is it not operating in this way for everyone else, and why? And in what way did you have to manipulate it specifically to be for your use? And, in addition to nostalgia, what is the journey of that? Was a question I had too.
I love that. Any questions that you have right now while you wrote this piece earlier today, you mentioned, but things that are percolating for you, things that you're thinking about?
I guess it's just like, do you think that it was too simple, or do you think or anything like that? Because I just literally put it together like 15 minutes before this started.
No. Yeah, I think everyone is worried that their work is simple, and it's just not. It's not simple. I am very fascinated by what is happening in the poem. And so I think you should explore what the poem is trying to tell you, for sure.
I agree.
You want me to say what it is, or am I not supposed to say what it is?
You could do whatever you want.
Basically, it's the object is a small little ball that I've had since childhood. And I'm a writer, and that ball is the image that's in one of my stories, and that was the first story I ever completed.
I love that.
Wow.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you.
Awesome. And absolutely, someone was just mentioning, like, all that feeling came from, right, this ball, this object, this relationship to that. And what you may see right now as simple is so not, because the complexities live in the words in a way that, like, I think sometimes we can't see ourselves, or we don't allow to see ourselves sometimes.
What I love about this exercise, just to add on very quickly, is the idea of magical objects, right? That's a phrase we often use in theater as well, particularly magical realism, and the way in which objects, they transcend its mundaneness. So like, I'm taking notes on this little, like, the bill I was probably supposed to pay and didn't, right? and to anyone walking by, they'd be like, oh, that's trash. But to me, there's a whole story here. Yeah. There's a rent I didn't pay, or a parking bill that's accruing fees in the middle of a pandemic, right? Yeah. Like there's a history there. And so there's no simplicity in your ball. It's very, very deep.
Like, why do you still have that ball is what I wonder. It seems to be very important.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much. All right, we're gonna keep moving. Next up we have, and again, please correct me if I mispronounce your name, Leonel Garza. I'm gonna unmute you real quick. Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello. Where are you joining us from?
I am in El Paso currently.
Oh my God, amazing. Thank you so much.
And originally, thank you. This is super vulnerable. Okay.
Okay.
Ahí le va.
Yes.
Steel, plastic, aluminum flesh, hot burning on a hot spring day, floating on triangles and circles, chain ring tattooed on calf. The children's freedom smells like the blood of a butcher with COVID, The country ham started in Apodaca, and though too humble to admit, she feeds all U.S. children, sweet sweat tears, worn wrist, fork road, knife and sticky bone. America's pork tastes like her flesh. Slugs, yucky, why is she the sensible botana, as her children right away.
Wow.
Wow.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah. Very visceral.
Yeah.
Very bloody in a sense, like literally and metaphorically. I wonder, I kept thinking of like all the stories that I'm hearing of the way that this is spreading in meat plants, and I wonder if that has anything to do with it, and how we undervalue people who are so important to our society. And I think that that's what we're really seeing right now. And so I that's what I gathered from the poem, and I don't know if I'm interpreting it correctly, but it was quite overwhelming, especially like the bone and the meat. It's just it felt very grisly in some way.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, you know, just some of these key phrases like aluminum flesh and blood of a butcher with COVID, and too humble to admit, America's pork, the botanica, and you know, it's hard for me then to take. I you know, I hope this is okay to say. I know Leo. It's so good to hear your voice, and it's hard to take your context out of it in knowing that we're, you know, we are from or of a place like the border, and what that means in relation to this, and the idea of like a residual aftermath and like sorting through the mess, right, is another thing I felt pretty strongly.
Thank you so much. Leo, questions that you have right now about this piece for you? Or thoughts or anything of the sort?
Hello?
Hello? Okay, we got you now. Hello?
Oh, sorry, I keep on losing you. No, I just appreciate the process, and again, just getting out of my head a little bit, because writing is not my number one, but it was a long time ago. So it's just nice to get back into it a little bit.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Enjoy it.
Yeah. All right, I am gonna keep going. So next up we have Rosa. Unmute. Hello.
Hi,
Hi, where are you joining us from?
from Pennsylvania.
Oh my God, so awesome. I love that we have folks from all over. I feel like we haven't had someone from the same place twice, which is super exciting.
Yes, definitely.
Rosa, the space is yours.
Okay, here we go. So I haven't written in a while too. It's been years, but I really like poetry. And from the last session that we had, I was the same way as Erika, where I was inspired to pursue poetry and to enjoy poetry when my 6th grade teacher introduced me to Edgar Allan Poe.
Oh, that's so great.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, Annabelle Lee. That was one of my favorites.
Oh, love that. Awesome.
Yeah, so here it goes. Okay. I live in a state of happiness. Then in a few seconds, I transform into something else. Into something that is incredible, unimaginable, creative, and mouth-watering. It's strange because how I'm perfect in my wholesomeness parts, as I am, as I was created to be, up until I'm in the hands of a different creator. Then I change, and still, I'm in great bliss.
Wow.
Thank you. Thank you. Awesome. Isaac, let's start with you. Things that are standing out for you.
This a strong resonance that I really loved is transformation was a big theme. So much imagery, really pulling from this. You know, the idea of happiness, seconds transforming into something else, incredible, unimaginable, strange, perfect, wholesome parts. So like there's like a contrast there too that I found really, really interesting. So the idea of, it felt like circuitous in a way, a perpetual ongoingness.
Love that. Erika?
Yeah, I got a similar sense from the poem as well, a sense of impermanence and transformation, because transformation only can come from change, obviously, right? And so I love that idea of like, you know, going through a process and coming out on the other side, and like what does that mean? There's a sort of like, again, exuberance that I see in this poem, and a joy of being alive, also a celebration of creativity, which I thought was really great. And so I would love to see more of this. I really recommend that you keep, you know, mining your subconscious for what is going on in this poem.
Oh, thank you.
Rosa, questions or thoughts that are on your mind right now with this piece?
I guess I wanted to know whether, as a poet, should you stick to a theme? Should have certain like topics or certain subjects? Should that be part of your, you know, resume, you know, so to speak, like your, or not really? Does it really not matter?
I would say it doesn't matter. I think that you write what you need to write. And what's so amazing about poetry to me is that anything is possible. And so whatever theme that you have in your poem right now, it could change, and you could incorporate other themes. It could be a tapestry, you know. And so try not to limit yourself in what you're doing, and just really like engage with the work, and like have the freedom to just explore.
I love that.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you so much, Rosa.
Thank you, guys.
Awesome. Next up, we have Lauren de Julio Bell. I'm going to unmute you, Lauren. Hello?
Hello. Can you hear me?
Hello. Yes. Hello.
Hi, all. Okay, before I get home, I have to say I've read your work, Erika. I saw your play, Isaac, right before it closed at the Steppenwolf lobby. So you guys are all amazing, and thank you so much for all you do for the world of art and creativity.
Oh my God, thank you so much.
And I'm in Chicago as well, so.
Awesome. All right, the space is yours.
Okay, so mine is called Woman. She doesn't know how beautiful she is. Hands at her sides, she wades through wind like water, flowing, connected. She speaks in silence, words cascading, waterfalls leading nowhere, but the wind which blows them to and fro. A poignant reminder of the past. Earth moves with her, gentle, gliding like a river whose currents yield to peace. Powerful. And that's it.
I love that.
Thank you.
Wow. Earth moved with her, loved it. She speaks in silence, words cascading, really a lot of love in those moments that are sticking out to the folks in the chat. Erika, what's really sort of sticking out to you?
What I'm seeing here is there's a person, a spirit who doesn't know her own strength. And what does that mean when she learns what that is? And so I wonder what kind of transformation will happen, because I see it looming, and I wonder what's on the other side of this.
Awesome. I love that.
Echo that, and you know, the water imagery is just sending in this And it's so funny, Erika, you said that because I felt the same way in wondering, like, you know, water is a portal often, right? In a very spiritual sense. And in a very literal sense, water's nourishment and also a reflection. And the removal of water also tells it's like water is a source of life, right? And so so that undercurrent was so present throughout the piece that it made me really excited to think about, you know, what might happen if this person, the spirit, whomever it is, what do they see in the pool of water, right? And exactly as Erika's saying, what's on the other side of it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Lauren, what are some questions or some thoughts, the things that are sort of front and center for you right now?
I love, Isaac, that you said undercurrent, which is, you know, current water, that connection to even in your description. You know, so I'm working on kind of a series of poems that have to do with being a woman. And I think what I struggled with for this one is kind of like with everything going on in the world right now, this idea of even kind of sitting down and putting our voices to paper. So in this particular piece, I think just this, like there's so many things kind of all circling around in this current of, you know, our lives, and how to kind of succinctly, but still in like a kind of a way that flows, bring these ideas to life, if that makes sense. Because there are a lot of like juxtaposing feelings, being a woman in this world, being a woman in this world right now, all of the things happening with this pandemic. So for this poem, I think I felt like I had a good like foundation, but I struggled with like kind of getting to that next level of really kind of exploring what that means, if that makes sense at all.
Yeah, I think a lot of us don't know what anything means right now, and that's okay. And that sort of ambiguity that we're living with, it could be such a source of creativity. And, you know, just not knowing is something that is okay in poetry. You know, there's this concept that was developed by John Keats called negative capability, where he believes that true poetry is an exploration of the unknown and being okay with that unknown and not searching for answers necessarily. So your poem could be a series of questions, not literally, but metaphorically in a sense. And so it's hard to make sense of something that we're so deeply in right now. And so if you don't have answers, I think it's okay, because most people don't. And I think just being okay with that is key in writing, where you just, you lean into that unknown rather than to try to figure out an answer.
Totally. And I also, Isaac, were you about to say something?
I was just gonna add very briefly that to emphasize and a lot of what Erika's saying, which is also like the only way out is through, right? And I think in pieces exploring so much of what it means to be who you are in whatever context, whether it's in a like social political sphere like gender identity, or in a more interpersonal sense like being a sibling or whatever, right? Like the only way to know what is on the other side is just to keep working through it. And I love the idea of poetry being the bridge between the two.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Lauren.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to share. I know how many people are on this call, and I appreciate all the comments as well.
Awesome. All right, I'm gonna keep us moving. So next up, we have Eugene. I'm gonna unmute Eugene. Hello, can you hear us?
Unmute now. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yay.
Awesome.
Hi, thank you so much for this workshop. Big fan of your work, Erika.
Thank you.
Met you briefly at the Bronx Book Festival back in.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I'm coming from West New York, New Jersey, the side of the side.
Awesome.
Super exciting. Eugene, the space is yours.
All right. A sporadic, abandoned, humid night. A pulse, 2 pulses. The music plays in an oblivion of fantasy or desire. Nevertheless, a baby apron. I hold the pen grasped onto the desk. Here I breathe. Seatbelt, copy, belt. Do I tighten or loosen? How he say?
Awesome. Thank you.
Would you mind reading the last line? I didn't catch that. I'm sorry.
How he say?
How he say? Awesome. Thank you so much. Isaac, let's start. Anything that's for you sticking out right now?
Yes, very present. It's very present. It's very active. This is, it felt like an experience to me. And also a strong resonance is it felt like an exploration of restriction and freedom, of something old, yet something familiar, and the tension between the two.
Awesome. Erika?
I really enjoyed the imagery of the summer night, the humidity. It felt very sensual, not in a sexual sense necessarily, but in a way that engages the senses. And I think that was really evocative. I was also really struck by the baby apron, if I heard that correctly. It was such a strange image that I was like, what is going on there? And I really, really wanted to know. And I don't think it needs to be explicitly explained, but I would love to have more context of what that is, because it's just not anything I've ever read in a poem.
Eugene, for you, what is a question or two or thoughts that are sort of with you right now about this piece?
Yeah, I think a big takeaway from the whole this whole workshop experience has been the exercise where we were translating the poem, the other language. So that I found challenging, and some of these lines are from that exercise, and I kind of just threw them in there, hence the baby apron line.
Oh, okay.
I love that. I love that.
I think it's a great image. I just want to see it flourish.
Thank you for the comments. It was neat to get out of my mind and write this, but then hear how people interpret it from the chat and from your comments. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you for sharing.
Thank you so much, Eugene. All right, we have our last participant today. I know that there are so many of you who I wish we could hear from as well, but for the sake of time for today, this next person will be our last. I'm going to unmute Liliana.
Oh my God! Hi.
Hi, Liliana.
Hi,
how's it going?
It's oh my gosh! It's so good.
Oh my God! I did not know you were on this workshop. Liliana is a young adult council alum.
Yes.
Who is, which is super exciting. Hi, Liliana.
Hi, Abby. It's so good to see. Wow. I was not expecting any of this. Okay, great. Erika and Isaac, you guys are incredible. Also, shout out to the ASL interpreters. They're doing a fantastic job.
Thank you.
So yeah, I'm also, okay, I'm gonna get to the poem, but I'm not a poet. I am an actor. So I don't know if this is gonna sound like a monologue, but here goes nothing. It also doesn't have a title. So, okay, here we go. Car window fire dies and it's raining wet. Windows see the lightning striking the shiny moon in the blue cobblestones. Sharp, prickly lightning in the shiny blue cobblestones. I and she, Chicago Romans, original champagne claws back before cannabis crept into the tiny hairs. She can't have mind for a bilateral mojo. You bake poppy seeds. She bakes moon tapestries, normally following my swimming pool Cheez-It galore. When did she trust, and why still?
Mm.
That's it.
Oh,
Oh.
thank you so much, Liliana.
Thank you.
Isaac, things that are sticking out for you. Oh, I think you're muted right now, Isaac.
Sorry.
Oh, you're good.
Zoom. It's been a day of Zooms. It's a very another viscerally beautiful moment. I love this, the way in which you take me back to what feels like a very specific moment in time, or not, but one that is perpetually ongoing, if that makes sense. So like a metaphor for something consistent, which I think is very moving. I sense a lot of memory here. I love the way memory works in poetry, because memory in general, quite literally, is piecemeal and also subjective. And so the way in which memory has unfolded in the poem, it feels representative of that, and the filter in which we're experiencing through it is yours and yours alone. And it makes me excited to know more about who you're with. That's what I'm curious about.
I love that. Erika.
Yeah, I also see this sort of anxiety, being stuck in a moment. And I feel like a lot of us are feeling that right now. So I felt very like connected to that feeling. Also the repetition I really enjoyed. I thought the rhythm was really interesting, and that added kind of to the frenzied quality to the poem. And this was another sensual poem, I would say. It was very vivid in its imagery. And I had, maybe this is just me implementing my own experiences, but it felt like a very Chicago night. And I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what it evoked for me.
Yeah. I love that. And I wanted to also lift up that, like, I think that we're never one thing. So I think you are both a poet and an actor, Liliana. I think that was something that, you know, we have to really keep thinking about.
Thank you, Abby. That was so sweet.
Do you have any questions or thoughts that are like really sticking with you right now about this piece?
Yeah, it's about this piece, but it's also just like about other pieces, because I've just been like writing a bunch in isolation, and I can never tell when something is finished. So I can't tell if this poem is finished. Like I just like finishing things, like ending things, like I have a hard time doing
Absolutely.
it.
Absolutely. Erika or Isaac, yeah, thoughts on, I feel like that is always so different for each writer to like understand when something is quote unquote done or finished. But how do y'all navigate that?
I think that there's no one formula, honestly. I think for me, it's very intuitive. It's something that I feel like I've exhausted the poem, that I've taken it as far as I possibly could, that it's the best thing that I could have created, that there's no way to make it better, that I don't have the capability of making it better. And once I reach that point where I'm like, well, this is it, you know, that's when I feel that it's complete. And even when I feel like something is complete, sometimes I go back and I'm like, oh, I wish I would have done this. I wish I would have done that.
Of course. And
you just kind of have to make peace with that feeling where it's like, well, you know, it's published now, so what am I gonna do? You know, it's out of my hands. It doesn't exist. It's not mine anymore. And so it's a process. And I think, yeah, just asking yourself, is this the best I can do? And if the answer is yes, then I think the poem is finished.
Great, thank you so much.
Isaac, yeah, anything you'd like to add?
Just that for me, echoing, as always, everything my soul sister is saying about this moment. And also that, you know, for me, it's about it's different, right? Because I think for me, for playwriting, it's about what rocks have been unturned. When I do write poetry or short prose or essays, like those are easier for me to let go, because they feel very permanent in their existence. Like I wrote it and I never want to revisit this again, right? They're like, I had one quick thing to say, versus my plays, which are ongoing exploration of the human psyche and largely mine. And so as I evolve as a human, as do my plays, I have yet to be published. I know, it's so sad. But maybe one day, who knows? Yeah, no, not yet,
That's
girl.
ridiculous.
You know, it's.
I'm mad about it.
I could tell you stories of why the publishers haven't published my plays yet, but I'm not trying to.
We'll talk later, please.
We'll talk
about systemic oppression in this moment. But what I will say is that it allows me the ability to revisit every play I work on with a subsequent production, with the context in mind of the current moment. So
I love that.
Me.
Yeah. Thank you.
It's fun. It's exhausting, but it's fun.
That's awesome. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Liliana.
Thank you. Beautiful work.
I'm going to take a quick moment to shout out everyone who shared today. Y'all are so amazing. Thank you so much for being vulnerable in a virtual space. I know how hard it is to do in a physical space, and I can only imagine, you know, how that feels as well. So thank you so much. If you weren't able to share, I know I wish we were able to get to so much more. You can still, if you would like to share, post on Facebook or Instagram and use the hashtag #VirtualStepEd. And, you know, we can all follow that hashtag and see everyone else's work and sort of continue this community beyond this workshop as well. So I wanted to sort of say that as well. I want to take a moment, Erika, because I know one of the big things is like, we want everyone to also like continue, right? The thing doesn't stop here. I think we're also questioning like, when is the thing done? It's not done, it's not finished. So I know, Erika, you have a writing sort of exercise or prompt that you have that you're going to share. And I will also say that after this workshop, I'm going to be emailing out to everyone who registered through the Wufoo link, sort of the writing exercises we did in part 1, as well as the exercise that Erika is about to mention right now, and another one that Erika has for you as well. So Erika, so metaphor dice, talk to me about it.
Yeah, so a friend of mine is married to a poet, and also a friend of mine, who has developed these metaphor dice that I think are really fun, and they're very helpful when you're stuck. And so and his name is Taylor Molly, if anyone's interested, and you could buy them, I think, on Amazon. And so like I have a bazillion of these, and when I need a little push, then sometimes I just roll these dice, right? And they'll give you a phrase that is quite poetic, and you just write in response to it. It could be the title, it could be a line, whatever you want. Just let the phrase guide you in whatever way you prefer. So I'm gonna roll the dice and then I'm gonna read the phrase to you. Excuse my cat. She really loves to be on camera. Okay. I don't like this one. I'm going to do it again. Oh, okay. The heart is a wordless prayer. I'm going to write it in the chat.
Okay, you got it. Amazing. Can you speak it again?
The heart is a wordless prayer.
Wow. So that is sort of like our jumping off point. Anyone can use it as like the first line. They can use it as the name of their poem, or they can use it as inspiration. But that is what we're going to go off of, right?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay. Super exciting. So again, that's going to be listed in the email document that I'll email to anyone who registered through Wufoo. Awesome. So I kind of wanted to take a moment to have a conversation between the two of you to sort of close us out. If anyone has questions that they have, feel free to throw it in the Q&A and I'll sort of weave it into our conversation. Isaac, could we start, since I feel like I'm so excited that you're here, could you talk a little bit about, I think last week we talked a little bit about how poetry informs, you know, Erika's work as a writer in more than just as a poet, like in different forms as well, how poetry finds its way into I'm Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter and her essays and other ways. When you were reading I'm Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter for the first time, could you really talk about like what sort of, how you engaged poetry? I feel like so much of that book also is poetic in so many beautiful ways, and I wonder how it really struck you.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we begin, I just have to say, I have to address the awkward elephant in my moment, which is that I have not eaten at all today, and my partner so generously brought me a grilled cheese, and I'm literally gonna pass out if I don't eat. So I'm like, I'm out here like, oh, prolific words, and I'm like trying to sneak these sandwiches in. I'm like, what is this fat ass doing over here? And I'm just
I love that you're eating. I wish I had a sandwich.
Right, a grilled cheese.
I'm gonna text your boo and be like, come on.
Yes.
He's always making me sandwiches, so.
I love that.
In terms of I Am Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter, I mean, it was the poetry that I fell in love with first. Then the characters were shortly thereafter. I mean, and by short, I mean like by millimeters. You know what I mean? That opening sentence is poetry. You know, what surprised me most about seeing my sister dead is the lingering smirk on her face. And though it is such, and Erika's heard me say this a million times, but it is such a beautifully constructed sentence that as a writer, I mean, I fell in love like pretty quickly. I was like, I don't know who this person is, Erika Sánchez, but I hope I get to meet her one day. And so what an honor to work with her from between then and now. And so, and then just diving deep into the book, I mean, like, I think of poetry also not just like I think what I love about Erika's poetry and all of the poems I've read, whether in Lessons on Expulsion and I hope I said their title right. Did I fuck it up?
No, you got it.
Cool. Sorry, ADHD brain. So I was like, did I fucking say the wrong title of Erika's poetry?
No, you're so good.
Whether that or the singular poetry that she's posted online in various publications or forums. Yes, I've stalked and read everything Erika said. And what I love about her poetry is that it I think destigmatizes the like what at least I have internalized as like the Emily Dickinson way of experiencing poetry. And no shade, I love Emily. You know, that was some of my earliest introductions to poetry, but Erika made it feel familiar. The things that she was writing about felt so true to me and to who I am. And even in the stories that I know aren't mine, I felt embraced by her words. And that's how the book feels. It feels like a big hug, and not just in the way language is used, you know, in terms of vocabulary and syntax, but also in just the structure, the sentence structure. It feels literally like you're on a, like this, they're moving, there's some momentum there in like such a beautiful way. And my plays function very similarly. And that was a big reason why I really wanted to adapt this book. I felt such a kinship in the writing.
I love that. I love that. And Erika, I wonder if you could speak a little bit about, on the flip side of like seeing I Am Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter, that adaptation at Steppenwolf. Did you feel like you, could you speak to, I'm always curious how poetry finds itself manifested in like a performance, or in not even a performance, but also like in the set, in the theatrical life of it. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about like your experience watching the adaptation, and sort of thoughts that really you clung on to.
Yeah, well, first of all, the night that it opened, I was just a wreck. Just so nervous, so emotional, and I wasn't even in it. Like I was just watching it, right? I just was blown away the entire time. I was just surprised, over and over and over and over again. And I wrote the book, so it was interesting. It's that it was still so new to me, that, or it became new in a sense. And I think that is because Isaac is a fucking genius. And he was able to really capture the spirit of it and then make it his own in a sense. And I love that. I loved the way the poetry was a part of the production. And I mean that through the dialogue, through the beauty of the set. There was just so much, I felt like saturated in this just lovely feeling. And I was like, I felt embraced by the colors and the humor. He brought the humor to life in a way that I just couldn't have imagined. It was just really funny, and the actors are just incredible. You know, when I was writing the book, I wondered, like, are people gonna think this is funny? Because I think it's funny, but like, what if it doesn't translate, right?
Yeah.
And it did, and the way that Isaac was able to really highlight like the Mexicanness of it all, I just was stunned, and I was so happy. And to see my family, my friends, this audience just laugh and cry and, you know, have all of these experiences together, it was just so moving. And I've never experienced anything like it, honestly. And the fact that it will likely return is just, it makes me so happy, because I know that it means a lot to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know how Isaac did it. Honestly, I have no clue.
Well, I also think that what you speak to is like echoes what you were mentioning earlier this week, in which poetry is not the genre, right? Poetry is the lens with which we engage the story, the narrative, the work.
Yeah.
And I think that sort of seeing that live with like between mediums, seeing that live in the text, and then seeing that live in the production as well, I think that's just like really lifting up what you were saying earlier this week.
Yeah, no, it just really captures so much, a lot of things that are often overlooked, the beauty in the everyday, the beauty in just, you know, being Mexican in Chicago. It's something that's really special, and I feel like the play really showed that and celebrated that, and I just really am
I love that.
so honored by it.
Isaac, I wonder if you could talk, there was a question about like what may have been some of the challenges writing the adaptation. Could you, I'm only laughing because I also know from one aspect of it, so I was like, oh, I mean, the first draft of this was, what, 400 pages?
Yeah, about.
Yeah. Yeah. It's tough. And we're like, how do we make it a 90-minute play?
You know the book better than I do, I think. Oh my God.
I think it's in your spirit. I just happen to be like the one who I'm like very much in the world of medical right now because of the stuff that's been happening to my father, and so this is the only analogy I can think of at the moment. But I feel very much like a doctor receiving a medical chart. You know what I mean? Like the patient knows their lived history, aka the author of the book, but me as someone who's gonna help translate the material into a different way, I have to literally like examine every facet that is humanly possible and turn over every rock. You know, there's so much in the book that Erika, one of the million of amazing things that I love about it is how much she leaves to the imagination of the reader. And in these like tiny moments, because Julia's mind, she takes us through so many tangents, but she always comes back. There's a relevance, you know, and I empathize with that because I tend to ramble. And so but I'm like, I know I'm getting somewhere, you just got to give me a minute. And yes, and Julia is the same way. And so when I realized that, I was like, let me live in some of these tangents for a moment. So, you know, like in the Quince, in a chapter of the Quince, there's like a tiny reference to everyone crying, but not for the reasons that you think they're crying. they're crying because they miss Olga, right? Something like that. And I was like, man, let's see. I wonder what that looks like if we live in it. And pulling from my own experiences of quinceañeras, you know, I used to choreograph quinces in high school, believe it or not. I've been a chambelán for a couple of my friends, and it was my time to shine. And I wanted to see what that would look like on its feet. And the quince happened to be one of the most memorable moments of the play.
Amazing. Just stunning.
It's so funny and really sad. Like I even cried, and I don't cry a lot in my plays, but I the way Karen and Eddie and the entire team plays it when she's having the father-daughter dance. And it was so beautiful to see so many audiences, especially women and femmes who've had quinceañeras and have had that moment with your father of being adored by him, but also like, you don't know who I am, do you? You know what I mean? And that tension that Julia's going through in the book, and to see so many people laugh and cry at the same time because of that familiarity, it lets you know, like, this is why this story needs to exist in every medium, not just theater and novels, you know?
I love that. Thank you. Thank you so
and
much.
The dance was amazing.
Really
That's all Isaac.
I did choreograph the dance.
Oh my God. Erika, there's a question in the chat, in the Q&A about sort of the ending of Daughter, and wondering how did you sort of find your way to that specific ending? And sort of, you know, Rosa mentions in the end of the story, Julia decides to follow in her family footsteps and keep her sister's secret away from her parents too. She thought Julia was going to break the cycle. How did you decide, sort of, how did you get to that point? Yeah, of the ending.
That was a hard choice. I deliberated about that for a long time, and I think essentially what I wanted to show was that Julia is sacrificing something for her family, just the way that her family has sacrificed so much for her. And it was an act of love to withhold this information, because she knew that it would break their heart. And even though that she believes in living a true, authentic, honest life, she felt that it was more important to protect her parents from another way of grieving, you know, like they were gonna be devastated by this information. And so I wanted to show that she was growing as a person. She was maturing. She wanted to do this as an act of love.
It's funny you say that, because we that is the exact decision we came to in the rehearsal room, because, you know, what's interesting and challenging about a play in general, right, is that the actor has to make active sense of the decisions. So even if that's not my intention, for example, in writing a play, you know, an actor is like, Isaac, this may not be the intention you're going for, but in order for these pieces to fall into place, it's the one that needs to make sense to me, right? And that's sort of the ongoing relationship between the actor and the writer. What's beautiful about what Erika just articulated, and us talking about Julia's journey with Karen, the actor who played Julia beautifully and brilliantly. She's incredible. An ensemble member there at Steppenwolf as well. She was like, you know, it is, you know, for what it's worth, like, Julia's attempts at being heard and understood to some people might be read as selfish throughout the play, right? Throughout the book, when really she's just trying to be understood. And then this act of maturity is the most selfless thing she could have ever done for her family. And it really does show that growth and evolution for her.
I love that. Well, Isaac, Erika, thank you so much for joining us. What a special session today. Erika, thank you so much for being a part of this week's Maker Workshop. I know that I have so much fodder to, like, sort of go from here and continue. And I will send all of that also to the folks and the participants here. Also wanting to take a moment to shout out our amazing captioner and ASL interpreters who were really, really awesome in making this work just really accessible today and this week in general. I wanted to, can we leave with like, what is a song that is sort of your song right now? What is the thing that's sort of keeping you going right now? Just to end on a note of like, yeah, anything that is really resonating, sticking out with you.
I need to look it up because I don't remember the title, but the artist is Swamp Dogg. He is just so brilliant and like really underrated. His song is called, oh Jesus, I'm so, just one second.
Okay, Isaac, do you have something?
I don't know if I would call it, I'm living in a place of nostalgia these days. And so, you know, I think in the midst of the pandemic, and I have playlists for all of my plays. This is gonna sound so cheesy and stupid, but whatever.
No.
I have playlists for all of my plays as I work on them.
I love that.
And my playlist for I'm Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter has Paloma Mami. And so I've been listening to a lot of her music and just missing our production together. I miss it.
Who is this? I'm sorry.
Paloma Mami.
Paloma. Oh, I don't know her.
Yeah, that's the artist that that Jasmine puts on at the party. And it's,
okay.
When they're dancing and when Julia's like looking so awkward and being like, you know, and she's like, wait, your sister, right? She's dead. And then,
right. Oh, yes. Okay.
That's
so
Paloma.
Cool.
That's Paloma. And it's funny because I polled my youth from Albany Park Theater Project, and I was like, what are the tea? What's the tea? What's the music? And Paloma Mami's the one right now.
So I love that.
I'm gonna play it right now.